Chapter 10. Born of the Flesh. In John chapter 3 verse 6 it says, "That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit." Here in the material world, where the real self of man, the soul, is imprisoned in a body of flesh, most of mankind is in spiritual darkness, though this fact is seldom recognized. When we are born of the flesh, the soul is out of touch with the life-giving word, and, in most cases, is shut off completely from the higher, happier worlds. In addition, due to the soul's association with the mind, it has forgotten its divine origin. As a result, men are not aware of their principal and primary duty. This is to turn away from this world and return to the infinitely higher dwelling place of the Supreme Father. If man but knew his real self, the soul, he would find that in its own sphere of action, and when freed of the mind, it has tremendous power. But here, in the coarse and dense material world, its power is suppressed and, so to speak, smothered under the coverings of the mind and the various bodies. The masters say that when the soul is born into a body of flesh, it is like a brightly shining lamp that is covered over with several pieces of heavy cloth. The mind, the causal body, the astral body, and the gross physical body. The brilliant radiance of the soul is undimmed, but it cannot penetrate its coverings. These shut it in far more than men realize, and prevent its powers of action and expression from functioning at more than a fraction of their great potential. Under these conditions, most human beings are virtually dead, spiritually, but they do not know it. They do not know, for example, that above and beyond this world there are innumerable other and much superior worlds, filled with light, beauty, and true happiness. They do not realize that even the best life in this world is a drab and dreary affair as compared with the freer, happier, and more spiritual life of these higher worlds. They do not know that if one looks down upon this world, as the masters and many of their disciples do from the higher regions, the earth resembles a dirty slum or tenement district surrounded by clouds of darkness created by the evil thoughts of men. They do not know that it is possible to enter and visit the higher worlds while still living here in the human body, and that this is the path that all men must and will follow in due time. Relatively speaking, all things of this world are transient and temporary. All human experiences are transitory, and our whole span of life in the flesh is only one of many short episodes in the ages-long history of the spiritually beautiful soul which, like its creator, is deathless and eternal. We are not here to live forever. Actually, in the divine plan for our redemption, the material world is only a camping ground where we stay for short periods from time to time during our journey back to our eternal home. As Omar Khayyam's Rubaiyat says, in all truth, "'Tis but a tent where takes his one day's rest a sultan to the realm of death addressed. The sultan rises, and the dark farash strikes, and prepares it for another guest." The pleasures of this life are not only short-lived, but only too often turn into bitterness or disappointment. In reality, when one rises up and begins to know the truth, with the Master's help and guidance, he sees that worldly happiness is no more than an illusion, a mirage. For what seems to be happiness is momentary pleasure, and only too often brings sufferings of some kind in its wake. The fact is, as the Masters teach and universal experience confirms, there is no lasting peace or happiness in the pleasures of this world. On this point, Guru Nanak says, All the world is in pain and grief. Only he is happy who dwells in Nam, the Word. And Sajobai, the famous holy woman of Rajasthan, says, all the wealthy I have found unhappy. All the poor are the picture of pain. Sajo, only lovers of God are in peace, having found the secret of the name. Actually, there is only one real pleasure, one genuine happiness open to human beings, which never ends in disappointment, painful reactions, remorse or regrets. This is the joy of listening to the divine melodies of the sound current and of being borne upwards by them towards the Father's, our Father's home. Brothers, says Guru Nanak, only those are truly happy who reach their eternal home. Here, few situations are permanently free of pain, and for many, as the French writer Albert Camus has said, life on this earth may best be described as the long anguish of living and dying. Sooner or later, life deals all of us heavy blows that sicken or sadden the heart. Sooner or later, we all have our tears to weep. Human life and the pleasures of this world are such a kaleidoscopic affair. Here today, gone tomorrow. In this ever-changing life, happiness coexists with misery, fortune with misfortune, prosperity with adversity, companionship with separation, health with illness, enjoyment with anxiety. Each follows the other like scenes in a play. And we too are like actors in a play. Like actors, we attach the utmost importance to playing our human roles, striving for success, for money or for fame, in whatever role we are cast, and becoming so deeply involved in the play that we forget our real life, the life of the spirit. The play of material life becomes all-absorbing, just as a drama seems real to the actors when they identify themselves fully with their parts. But the play of human life is only for the time being, a temporary phase in the far greater drama of the immortal soul. How many of the actors are genuinely happy? How many, under the polite masks they show the world, are leading, as Thoreau surmised, lives of quiet desperation? And how many are there who, though outwardly serene and poised, are inwardly filled with doubts and uncertainties, emptiness, loneliness or bitterness, regrets for the past and fears for the future? Most thinking persons who have pondered upon the problems of this world have found it in very truth a sorry place. Mankind today, perhaps more than in any other age, seems to have gone astray, to have taken, oftentimes deliberately and rebelliously, the wrong path. The world today seems willing to try every way except the right way. It has been said that nowadays the world is filled with the results of intellectual and scientific activity, and of spiritual inactivity. Certain it is, in any event, that spiritual darkness broods over the world today, and to many millions of human beings life consists largely of trials, tears and troubles, while to some it is a tragedy. The English poet Matthew Arnold wrote, "For the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night." Though Matthew Arnold's indictment of the world may seem harsh, there are only too many whose experiences here bear out his well-considered testimony. These truths, like some of the others that have been taught throughout the ages by the spiritual masters, are unfamiliar and in some cases distasteful to many people in the West. For Western people have been prone to maintain, against all contradictory evidence, that everything is for the best in this best of all possible worlds, and that God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. This is the philosophy needed by some, and indeed the philosophy that is officially endorsed by the leading Western religious organisations. But thoughtful persons are well aware that in this world there is much that falls short of perfection. And the truth of the matter is, according to the teachings of the Masters, that this world is not intended to be a perfect or even a near perfect one. It is in one of the lowest parts of the entire creation, and one of its purposes is to serve, if the truth be known, as a kind of reform school for wayward souls. This world is either a school, a hospital, or a prison, but it is never a paradise. There are relatively few, however, who are willing to accept this fundamental truth, at least when it is first presented to them. It is not intended to paint too dark a picture of human life. Some joy is to be found here too, but basically this world is a testing ground. The truth is that it is God's kindergarten. The Masters often call it the prison house of mind and matter. Swamiji in the Sarbachan says, "This world, which is a wilderness, has been mistaken for a residence. Its good things, which are all perishable, are taken for the true and real, while that which is actually real is altogether lost sight of. Here all are tested in one way or another, for the earth is not meant to be a place of unalloyed happiness, as so many suppose. God's purpose is that character should be tested, oftentimes up to the hilt, while we are here on earth." Mind and soul. When we are born of the flesh, we are, in most cases, born into a life in which the soul is, to a large extent, dominated by the mind and the mind's inherent love for things of this world. Under these conditions, the soul, which is sometimes called the witness self, can watch everything that takes place, but cannot always control the wayward and willful impulses of the mind. Defining the position of the soul, one of the Indian Upanishads says, "Unseen but seeing, unheard but hearing, unperceived but perceiving, unknown but knowing. This is thyself, the ruler within, the immortal." It should always be remembered that the soul is the real living entity and a reality of the first order. It is made of the essence of the Supreme One, our true God. The mind, however, is inert and less activated by the soul, and is a reality of the second order, for it is made of the essence of Kal, the negative power. Kal is powerful, there is no doubt about that, but he can use only the limited powers assigned to him by the Supreme Lord God. It should also be remembered that the one thing for which we have been born into this world is the liberation of our souls from the bondage of mind and matter. Relatively speaking, nothing else matters, or is worth bothering about. Self-improvement, which to a large extent means purifying the mind, is our principal duty, our most sacred obligation. So the Masters repeat over and over again. When regarded from the Master's point of view, life on this earth is largely a struggle between the mind and the soul. For when we are born of the flesh, the soul is in the enemy's country, and the enemies are the mind and its good friends, the senses, and the 5 evil passions: lust, anger, greed, attachment to worldly things and people, and pride, vanity or egotism. It is the mind, with its ceaseless activity and love for worldly things and people, that stands between the soul and God. It is the one great obstacle, until the time comes that it is brought to its knees and trained to concentrate on spiritual matters. Strictly speaking, says the Master Sawan Singh, we are living an abnormal life. Soul combined with mind and matter is an abnormality. Soul, the queen of royal blood, enjoying the company of servants and sweepers, the mind, the senses and the five evil passions, is an abnormality. Under these conditions, the soul functions under handicaps of the utmost severity. Beautiful, pure and spiritually powerful though it may be, it is in most men under the influence of and dominated by the mind, and the mind, as has been said, is the soul's most dangerous and determined enemy. The chief function of the mind is to serve as an instrument of the soul for all contacts with the material world. It is an extremely useful instrument, provided it is kept under control. It can be an excellent servant, but if it gets the upper hand, it is a bad and vicious master. In the mass of mankind, the mind is the master and willingly follows the promptings of the senses. The mind, it should be thoroughly understood, has a close fellowship with the senses and enjoys expressing itself through the five evil passions. These worldly passions or desires, with which all men are familiar, have been described as wild beasts roaming the world, seeking whom they may devour. They are the chief instruments used by the negative power and its agent here on earth, the mind, its offspring, to bind us to the material world. They seek always to draw us to objects of sense and what the masters call the filth of sensual pleasures. And sensuality, the masters teach, is death, while spirituality is life. Thus in many, if not most individuals, the senses and one or another of the five passions overwhelm the mind, and the mind in turn enslaves the soul. It often happens that the soul is quite unable to control its own mental instrument. If that instrument, bound on following the five evil passions, becomes too unruly and rebellious, the soul is powerless. The masters sometimes say that the mind is like a rogue elephant. It goes about unrestrained wherever it likes and drags the soul along with it. At other times, the masters compare the mind dominated by the five passions to a camel without a guiding string. It is likely at any moment to stampede and run away, and it may then run madly on to its own destruction. Under such conditions, the soul is helpless. It can only sit back and suffer in silence while the mind revels in its own debasement. Subtle and powerful in its own right, the mind, working hand in glove with the senses, imprisons the soul and prevents it from returning to the spiritual regions which are its native habitat. Constantly occupied with thoughts and desires connected with the people, pleasures and activities of the material world, it acts as a heavy veil between the soul and the heavenly melodies of the Word. It is for these reasons that the Indian sages have always taught that the mind is the veil and the mind is the slayer of the real. Swamiji of Agra points out in the Sarbachan, soul is surrounded by enemies in this world. Even the mind watches it just as a cat does a mouse which it intends to devour. The struggle between the soul and the mind and passions explains the enigmatic nature of man. He is a paradoxical creature, capable of rising to the sublimest heights of nobility and spiritual aspiration, and yet equally capable of sinking to the lowest depth. The mind, dominated by desire and attachments to the world and its transitory pleasures, is the cause of our bondage. The soul, ever yearning, albeit silently, to return to its own home, attains liberation through the practice of Nam Bhakti. Wrapped up in the never-ceasing activity of the mind, the average person looks at the show of life and forgets that he possesses a soul, or to put it more accurately, that he is a soul. Guru Arjan Dev, the fifth Guru in the line of Guru Nanak, says, When the mind is smitten by countless desires and is overshadowed all the time by avarice, there is no place therein left for God. It is because the mind clings to the material world with such an almost fanatical tendency that we who are born of the flesh are so deeply steeped in materialism. And the deadly enemy of man's spiritual progress is this same materialism, which nourishes in man desire for the material world. That the mind is so great an enemy of the soul is a new idea to many people in the West. It seems incredible, since it upsets their lifelong ideas. Yet the fact remains that it is part of the divine plan of the Supreme Creator. This plan calls for the evolution of man through the material and mental worlds and the ultimate victory of the soul over the forces of mind and matter. It is not intended, the Masters say, that we regain our divinity automatically, without any effort of our own. We are meant to strengthen ourselves by struggling for the light, and struggle we must. And the beginning of the struggle is the effort to subjugate the mind and make it the willing servant of the true self. It may be pointed out here that the mind can never be controlled by negation or efforts to suppress its strong desires. That simply cannot be done. Negation has only a temporary effect. The fire is only covered with ashes and will flare up again when the winds of passion blow. The materialism of the mind cannot be overcome by using its own material mental weapons, nor can the mind be conquered on its own ground. Like Antaeus, it thrives and grows ever stronger so long as it can keep its feet upon the earth. But when it is lifted above the earth by a higher power, it weakens and finally succumbs. To permanently control the mind, it must be given something that it enjoys better than the worldly pleasures, and the only thing that can supply this need is the divine music and spiritual power of the sound current. As a consequence, any method of spiritual development that does not make the sound current the vital factor in its system of spiritual exercises can never counteract the downward drag of the mind and senses. But once the mind has experienced the joy of listening to the divine melody, it will become attached to it for good, and its interest in the soul-destroying sense pleasures will come to an end. The Word of God, or the sound current, is the one and only successful means of permanent mind control by which a struggling human being, sore beset, can overcome the mind's good friends, the 5 evil passions, and liberate himself from all worldly desires and downward tendencies. The mind is a power that can bind us to earth, and it can also set us free, depending on how it is used. Most people unconsciously, and even willfully, use it for the former purpose. But those who follow the path of the Masters consciously use it to regain their lost freedom. We have attached ourselves to this world by thinking always of worldly things, but we can escape from the material world in the same way, that is, by meditating on God and the higher worlds in the manner taught by the perfect Masters, and thereby becoming attached to the divine sound current. Divine qualities constitute the essence of our true self. Purity, peace, and bliss are the eternal characteristics of our inner being. And as a result, man's inner hunger for spiritual unfoldment cannot forever be satisfied by the pleasures of this earth life. Unceasingly, through days and years of alternating joy and sorrow, quietude and storms, the eternal longing of the soul, calling from within the temple, is ever trying to make itself known to the outer man. But many ignore its divine promptings or refuse to heed its gentle pleading. Confined within the body and duped and dominated by the mind, man is limited. But in his soul he is limitless. hidden within him is a priceless jewel, though he knows it not. None is poor, O Bhikha, says Bhikha Sahib. Everyone hath rubies in his bundle, but how to untie the knot he doth not know, and therefore he is a pauper. Throughout the world today, many have forgotten the existence of their sublime and peaceful inner self, and their lives are troubled. But the self, in its long and patient vigil, has never forgotten us. God is in all men, says Sri Ramakrishna, but all men are not in God. That is why they suffer. The first step towards freeing the soul from its captivity is mastery of the pleasure-loving mind. Guru Nanak says, "Conquer the mind and you conquer the world." And Maulana Room, fully aware of the spiritual plight of mankind and pointing the way to the higher, better life, exclaims, "Whoever curbeth the flesh, the sun and the clouds doth he command." The control and purification of the mind, accomplished with the aid of a living master and the sound current, leads to the freedom of the soul and awareness of the spiritual realms. Master Sawan Singh Ji, in speaking of this particular aspect of the path, says, "Spiritual progress primarily depends on the training of the mind. In ordinary man, the soul is under the control of the mind, and the mind is controlled by the senses, and the senses are led away by the objects of senses. The attention thus remains wandering from object to object in the material world. The right way should be that the senses do not run after the objects, the mind is not led astray by the senses, and the soul has the grip on the mind and uses it as its tool to serve its purpose. The soul is to establish its supremacy over the mind instead of remaining its slave." Why did the soul lose its supremacy? Because it lost touch with the word and associated with the mind. Therefore, there is only one effective method of enabling the soul to regain its supremacy, and that is bringing the soul in touch with the word again. How to do this in the simplest and most effective way is taught by the perfect masters, and this, as has been pointed out, is the way that the Supreme Father has expressly provided for all who choose to avail themselves of it.